We're at mile 20 for the day, climbing the Bighorns. I think we're at like 8,600, 500, I don't know.
In a quite rural part of Wyoming. Hi Sam, hi Greta, hi Marianne.
Hope is a very strong word. And if we say it's hopeless, then I think people will stop working towards sustainable actions. Climate change affects every part of our life, so we have to take care of every part of our life.
I think this is kind of the first gathering that you guys have, virtual gathering that you guys have together. Our organization, CSCS, we come with a conviction that the climate issue is at least one of the, if not the most important issue. We also have a conviction that Anabaptist communities have something unique and important to say to that. Raising awareness, a large part of that is having the conversations, and conversations are about listening to the stories that people have, listening to the concerns and different perspectives that people have.
The route was designed as a collaboration with CSCS and looking at other established bike routes across the U.S. CSCS is mostly interested in places that are connected to the Anabaptist or Mennonite organizations and universities, and for advocacy like Washington, D.C.
The idea is to kind of engage local community members along the way and have either kind of like a discussion, a panel, visiting a farm, visiting a church. We're not out there to tell people exactly what you do in order to solve the climate crisis, but just having that conversation is doing something.
I'll come out of this experience with new perspectives, and not only from the people that we'll be riding with and connecting with, but also with the people that we'll be stopping and talking with along the way.
I think something about this climate ride that I like is that it lets me share the story of climate change, which is something that I feel like I'm really talented in, and not have to be, an actual scientist to do that.
I could not pass up the opportunity to do focused conversations around climate with people who are actually dealing with the effects of climate change.
This seemed like a really unique experience to get to learn from so many different other sources and people and experts in the field, and to just experience the effects our climate is having on this country firsthand as we bike through it.
I feel like you could just feel the air in the church that day.
Just so much excitement, the whole group there, so much energy, so much excitement to see people after not seeing them for a while and to see the new faces that I'd only seen on Zoom.
I think a lot of nerves of okay, we're doing this, there's no going back now.
Yeah, and I think everyone was just really excited, but also really nervous, and felt like we had no idea what we were doing, but we were gonna just dive right in.
Oftentimes we have placed climate change in this bucket of, oh, that's happening in the future, or that's happening to polar bears. It's happening right now in front of us.
This isn't just a conversation, a debate. It's life and death. Those stories of the here and now that you can try to get people to want to know more and to sympathize with.
This is something that we need to bring everyone along on, people with a lot of experience, like some people on this panel, and then people who are new to the party. And so it is an urgent issue, but there needs to be a place for everyone. And one other principle that I like to keep in mind, and I think it fits very well with Christianity and with climate advocacy, first to listen and then to learn and to love.
The total trip across the country is 3,800 miles or so across 13 states, and the elevation gain is over 120,000 feet.
So kind of beginning in Seattle and then heading east from there, we went over the Cascades basically in the first day. And we spent a lot of time in deserts so far. A lot of the area of eastern Washington, Idaho, and Montana really felt like very, territory that was very open and not very settled. Of course, there was some amount of getting used to doing 70-mile days as frequently as we are.
The hills and the heat, like we would just have to pull over and like wait in the shade. And we were also just getting used to it, so we were taking way longer.
There was like a week, just like gravel every single day, and people were just feeling it in their bones because you're shaking all day and your bike is being torn apart because you just have all this dust in your drive chain.
And I think a lot of us weren't used to the gravel, so it was like really painful for us to be like sitting in that position in the saddle for like 70 miles.
The main obstacle so far has been just like the hot days, like 95 to 100 degree weather. It just takes so much more out going up hills for me.
I just remember thinking like, how will I be able to keep doing this? My body was just like so tired.
But there was a lot of long mileage days. We went over the Bighorns. We had a century before that. We had a century after that. That was pretty tough.
We had a week that was like, we had 104 miles. The next day after that, we were doing like 7,000 feet of climbing up the Bighorn mountain range and then down. And then the next day we had 97 miles. But I had done more biking than most people will ever do in their lifetime or in a single day.
And then Joanna and David were just like, every day you're getting stronger, so you just got to keep going. And I was like getting up the hills and like, I can get up another hill. I am so shocked at like the mental and physical progress I feel like I have made.
But kind of with the help of the leaders and definitely kind of team encouragement, it's been really fun to kind of all get up to the level that we need to be at for biking.
Everyone on the team at one point after the Bighorns in the beginning of the Midwest were like, yeah, I'm not worried about getting to the end. I can totally do it.
Oh man, it felt really good. It was going to be like the hardest week of the trip. So knowing that was over meant you can do the rest of the trip.
And it felt like, okay, we've conquered this. We can sort of conquer everything.
The focus has been a lot of like getting to know our bikes and getting to know each other. And now I think the focus will be a lot more on learning about the places that we're going through and having those intentional conversations, whether it's on the bike or even just like we have a lot more events coming up that I think will spark really good conversations.
I think it took a while for a few of us to like really gather what was happening. Marianne and Dan, who are our drivers for the trip, they had come upon a couple of different folks staying in a picnic shelter area. It turns out it was Thaddeus and some of his family and friends. And his family said, we had set up these teepees, they got rained on, they need to dry out. We'd welcome you to stay in them tonight. Toby, one of the participants on the trip, said like, okay, if we're staying in the teepees, we'd love to have you come and join us for dinner. It was this beautiful time of sharing food and talking about stories and learning from Thaddeus. We have this idea a lot in the circles that I'm in that the land is for the taking. There's oil, let's extract it from the ground. Like, it's about what do we need from this land. And the way that Thaddeus described the land was more of a relationship and more of a gift that's not just for us to take, but for us to return back. The resources out there aren't just for consumption. They're not just for food for the people, but it is this intricate connection between what the land is and what our role is on that land to care for it and to respect it and honor it as a gift.
Got off route about 3 miles back. In like 20 minutes, we've gone maybe 200 feet. We're still in the prairies, potentially sending 3 people to a church nearby to get water.
So we made it back to a road, and I think it's actually the road we're supposed to be on.
I think it was pretty interesting for the writers to hear the perspective of the politicians from Lincoln. That's kind of like the beginning of our history on this trip of being able to like really engage with communities.
I think we have to keep trying to get a state climate action plan, but I guess I've become somewhat convinced that if we have a governor who denies the existence of climate change and you pass a state climate plan, not a whole lot's going to happen.
It's a kind of a very slow, long road to sort of decolonize our theology. But I've noticed that a lot of congregations have made really good faith efforts, I think, to educate ourselves. More of a growing edge, as far as what I've observed, is continuing to integrate the racism that exists everywhere and is part of the foundation of the U.S. and then the degradation of the land, the abuses of the land, and like how do these things intersect?
Talking about how do we get more people of color and people who are marginalized economically on boards and commissions and building networks so they can get the training.
We don't really need a white savior, but we need someone to bring us into the group, give us the training, and then give us the reins. There are always people looking for people to do the work. Just show up with the passion. Don't try to tell people what to do. Just show up and ask, how do I help? And they will give you an opportunity to help.
We can ride through the land, we can observe, we can see what's happening, but it's something else to hear it like directly from people who are involved with that process.
I'm Anna Geyer, and I'm part of this farming operation. There's nothing about farming in the way we do it now that is remarkably natural. There's a sense that human health and land health are so integrally intertwined. So I think the degradation of the land is a result of our own human hunger that we don't know what to do with. And when we learn to honor the natural rhythms, the natural cycles, the natural productiveness of the land, then that balance is much better. So practically it looks like, how do you keep the land in some kind of growing plant year-round? So if we're doing annual production like corn, soybeans, or food production like black beans or pinto beans, then in the off-season, you're growing something else that is contributing to the health of the soil. Or, even better, finding ways to do agriculture in a perennial fashion. So having perennials on the land that are always interacting with that microbial community in the soil.
So I think that the Geyer Farm tour was one of the first places where we really saw like an example of an alternative to conventional agriculture. So one of the things that Anna Geyer said was, find the patterns that work for you. Their pattern is like living into their agriculture and their food system. They're very intentional about how they go about cultivating their property and using their land so that like they're being efficient, both in terms of like using land well and like treating the land well so that it continues to be beneficial for them in the future.
You know, we work here alone much of the time. So to have a group of young, passionate, interested people show up is a great joy.
Welcome, everyone. It is a real treat to see so many of you gathered together tonight for this discussion and this time together. I see a lot of hope, deep grounds for hope, in what people can do together in community. And at our best, churches are an experience of transcendent community.
For me, an aspect of our difficulty around this is some of the complicated feelings of grief that we have around what we're losing. And churches are places where we talk about grief. We've mostly focused that on funerals and people dying, but I think we need to expand that and help people to find rituals connected to ecological grief as we lose places.
Looking into what makes a person install solar panels, what are the biggest determinants, and found this study. And we were thinking, income, political affiliation. The biggest one was having a neighbor that had installed solar. And what better, your church is your neighbor. It is the closest community that a lot of people have. So you can have that influence on each other, whether it's clean energy or some other thing collectively.
Being grassroots based, it makes sense for the church to also lead from the front, because to a very large extent, don't we have the greatest moral responsibility to be leading from the front? It then becomes a very big opportunity for the church to take leadership and live out radical discipleship from its identity.
Part of what animates CSCS in our work here, we do focus more and more on climate justice issues, and I think part of that is because that we are, as a church, called to that. As Anabaptists, as Christians, as people of faith, we are called to this very important issue.
Timey with Micah and Greta.
Okay, so for Climate Timey tonight, we're gonna talk about climate hopelessness. We did some research and reading about this stuff, and I'm gonna read some passages from a New Yorker article. If you care about the planet and about the people and the animals who live on it, there are two ways to think about this. You can keep on hoping that catastrophe is preventable and feel ever more frustrated or enraged by the world's inaction. Or you can accept that disaster is coming and begin to rethink what it means to have hope. All-out war on climate change made sense only as long as it was winnable. Once you accept that we've lost it, other kinds of action take on greater meaning.
We might not reverse it completely, but we still are reducing the effects of climate change.
I think it's an excuse.
Which is why
Because when you say it's hopeless, that means that you don't have to try anymore.
Why do anything without hope? Hope is the motivator.
Well, yeah, I think
But
that's
is hope a good? I mean, so what about hopelessness then? Do you never feel hopelessness when thinking about that?
I think I have decided no. I think I've decided for myself that I will not feel hopelessness. Every action that I take is reducing the effects. And as much as we can reduce the effects, that is good.
So it can't just be all hope and no action. It has to be both in order to achieve something.
Humans inherently struggle with the dilemma of being selfish and being generous. We can be generous to the extent that we have something to be generous with, but usually when we look at what we're being generous with, it's ill-gotten in some way. I don't think that we ourselves are actually authentic in our pacifist position. We're violent in ways that we hardly even recognize.
Those of us who do see pacifism as a core tenet of our theological belief, but also just our political belief, know that probably won't shift the whole world to be pacifists. So in a way, that's a hopeless position. And yet it's something that I find significant personal value in, even though, and Dan called it aspirational, it's an aspirational goal. But I think with climate change, there are a lot of parallels there that we can know with complete certainty that our actions won't reach what we hope.
And I'm not sure if I place a lot of value in hope or hopelessness, because based on what I'll read an article like that and I might feel hopeless, but I'll read an article the next day and I'll feel hopeful. I'm getting to the same destination regardless if I have hope or I am hopeless. So to me, it makes sense to say, this is where we're going. Am I going to live in a way that slows that down or speeds that up?
Make sure you enjoy this last bit too, and don't rush it in, and kind of savor the finish. We'll kind of do a group picture and at that Lincoln memorial with the Washington Monument there too, and the reflecting pool, and then we have a big celebration.
When you guys come into DC, It's going to be really cool because you're going to come in and you're going to go talk to your lawmakers from your local districts about your experience. So you're basically going to do a little bit of advocacy right there on the Hill. Thanks for everybody for coming. It's good to hear everybody talking with the writers. They left Seattle, Washington, and have now reached their destination, in which they spent these 8 weeks, of course, biking, but also talking to folks and communities along the way about climate issues.
The people that truly inspired me were ones who not only diagnosed the problem, but also offered a solution. And where I saw that most strongly was definitely the Geyer family farm in Iowa, and then also Clay Bottom farm in Goshen. A lot of people can understand the problem, but if you understand the problem and then don't act, so what? And that's a little bit of a scary thought, I think, for a lot of us, middle class people.
As we were biking through a lot of farmland, there was a lot of like, oh man, look at all this corn, all this soybeans, like monoculture is so bad. And talking with Isaac and realizing that like, yeah, farmers care very deeply about the land and they know what's good for the land. And they realize that a lot of the time, sort of the practices that they are sort of have to do in order to make a living, they know that they're not sustainable. Or a lot of people, sustainable ways of living are not as accessible.
Today, this crew biked into DC and then attended meetings with your members of Congress. Can you talk a little bit about how they went? What was the value of such meetings?
I felt listened to. I felt respected by both the people that I met with. I came to some mutual understandings on some issues. We had great conversation on others.
Overall, they did want to hear what we had to say. They did care about these things, and they were like willing to talk about it. They're my senators, but they're not really my senators. Like, that's how I thought about it before. Like they don't care about what I care about. But today I was like, okay, I do feel like, they respect me as their constituent.
And it was interesting to hear that they can have some say, and it's not just this one person that's making all the decisions. And so then it kind of felt more impactful to be like, okay, yeah, I can talk to you, we can agree on things, you can bring this to your senator, and maybe he'll actually listen to you.
When I was thinking of this day, I kept thinking that, the journey's ending, and then I said, I can't say that ever because it's not really ending. So we invite you, this trip is not just a story, it's an invitation. It's an invitation for you to join together, to join with us, as we are continuing our activities. Thank you very much for coming out. We hope to see you some more in other.
I couldn't ask for a better group. We were laughing so much and we just had a really good time. I'm so curious to see what people do after this and what they learn from this.
I think before this trip, I considered myself to be a writer who's concerned about climate change, but it wasn't my thing that I was working on. And I've sort of realized on this trip that to a certain extent, it's something that we are all going to be working with.
It's just seeing how everything comes back to climate, talking about racial justice, talking about indigenous rights, talking about immigration. To see it behind so many other issues is a real surprise and something that I think I will carry with me for a long time.
I think it's just the start for everybody. It's not, we get to DC, we finish the cross-country trip, but now everyone's planning what happens next. And that's really what matters out of this. It's not really just what happened here, it's what everyone does with this for the rest of their lives.
It's raining the entire time. It's raining the whole day. I got, 4 flats, I think, that day. 4 flats. We had a total of 10 flats. You got time. You're halfway through. Keep going.
comes Lauren. He did not look happy.
We got a couple hundred feet to climb yet, and then we'll be up and over. See ya.
Oh my goodness! That was so cool!